Bryan Kohberger was allegedly able to stab 4 Idaho college students to death in just a few minutes, well, it's a big question for the prosecution to explain to the rest of us, specifically the jury, but some insight into his past may give us some clues. Turns out Kohberger knew how to use a knife. Bryan worked as a fish cutter. He was a fillet man when he was in high school, trained to cut and fillet raw fish. I know how to do it. Means you gotta know how to use a knife. We'll see how Kohberger was.
This is Reporter Room with Jessica Della Davies.
Hello, Reporter Room investigators. Come on in, come on in. Woo! We had a lot to unpack in the Bryan Kohberger case. A lot of new information to get through. So let's get started. My name is Jessica Della Davies. I'm an investigative journalist, and my job is to investigate crimes, crime scenes, and potential suspects, and share with you how to do the same thing. If you haven't subscribed, well, please do. It's free, and I can't get to 50,000 subscribers without your help. Like, share, leave a comment, and let's get started. Let's start by talking about Bryan Kohberger and Papa Roger, and then we're going to talk about what turned out to be true and what did not turn out to be true. And is there something kind of in between where we just don't know because BK scrubbed his electronics? So, in the context of the Bryan Kohberger case, the Papa Roger Facebook account that sparked speculation due to its online activity right after the crimes were committed, sharing some details about the K-bar knife that only the person who did this or law enforcement could have known. So who is really behind the Papa Rogers account? Well, I believe that it was Bryan Kohberger. And let me share with you why. First of all, let's talk about the eerily precise details. Comments made in a Facebook group about the Idaho case mentioning the details of the crime, such as the knife sheath found at the scene. This was way before this information was released to the public. So how did Papa Roger know? The disappearance after Bryan Kohberger was arrested. Once Bryan Kohberger was arrested, the Papa Roger account disappeared. It went completely silent. Why hasn't law enforcement been able to link anyone else to the Papa Roger account? This seems like it would be a very easy thing for them to do by simply getting a search warrant from Facebook and finding out who Papa Roger is. And this information has not been clarified. We have not been told that the Papa Roger account belongs to someone else. So, although investigators have confirmed that there's no link between Bryan Kohberger and Papa Roger, this does not mean, in my opinion, that he was not behind this account. So let's go through the Moscow Police Department documents. We know that Bryan Kohberger studied Elliot Rodger when he was at DeSales University. And we also know that a lot of people have pointed out that the crimes were committed in Moscow, Idaho, which is a Russian city, where we have the city of Moscow. And what did the Papa Roger account choose for his avatar? Well, it was the name Papa Roger. And he also, which is a hat tip, in my opinion, to Elliot Rodger. And he also chose the image of a Russian soldier. Moscow, Idaho, Moscow, Russia. Same spelling, two different cities. Was this also a way to own the Moscow crimes without revealing who he was? Now, Darren Gilbertson of the Idaho State Police explicitly debunked the theory. He confirmed that there was no association between BK and the account, but we've also heard that Bryan Kohberger scrubbed all of his electronic devices. So just because they're not able to link him to Papa Roger does not mean, in my opinion, that he was not Papa Roger. So while the identity of Papa Roger remains unknown, the account became a focal point, in my opinion, due to this overly restrictive gag order that was put in place by a local magistrate judge at the request of Ann Taylor and Bryan Kohberger's defense team. A gag order that Ann Taylor would exploit, in my opinion, using words like secret and super secret in an effort to exploit the whole secretiveness and make it look like the prosecution was hiding information from her. Of course, we learned eventually this was not the case, as the new judge, the Ada County judge, who Ann Taylor desperately wanted the case to be moved to Ada County. This judge not allowing Ann Taylor to file things under super secret after she used the words secret, super secret, and big secret around 20 times during one of his hearings. I do think that this overly restrictive gag order did leave a large gap, in my opinion, for other people to attribute anything to. And this did lead to a lot of misinformation and also, I think, law enforcement leaking information out of sheer frustration with the prosecution and the defense team. So I have seen a lot of people reporting out that law enforcement said that Bryan Kohberger was not Papa Roger. This is not my understanding. They simply said that they could not connect him to the Papa Roger account. They also told us that he scrubbed all of his electronics. And so I'm not convinced yet, with the information that we have so far, that Bryan Kohberger was not Papa Roger. I want to talk about some of the different theories and conspiracies, some of which have been debunked, some of which are just plain nonsense, and some we still don't have the answer to. So what is true? What is simply not proven? And what has been proven to absolutely not be true? Besides the Papa Roger theory and other rumors that have been perpetrated in relation to this crime due to the vacuum left by this overreaching gag order, which gagged until 2023 even family members of the victims. Imagine your loved one survives this, and then you are placed under a gag order and not allowed to even share your thoughts or feelings about what happened. I think this gag order was absolutely ridiculous, and this just simply cannot happen again in the future. Let's start with some of the rumors. Number one, Bryan Kohberger visited the restaurant, the Mad Greek, where Kaylee had previously worked and where Maddie and Xana were currently working. Well, we have a person who worked in the restaurant, a server, that says that he did see Bryan Kohberger there on 2 occasions. We have the owner of the Mad Greek denying that Bryan Kohberger was ever there. Now, I don't know how the Mad Greek owner could say he was never there. I don't think she was sitting by the cash register every single minute for every single hour that the restaurant was open. But I do believe that the Mad Greek restaurant was very anxious to distance themselves from the Idaho case. Number two, that Bryan Kohberger followed the victims on Instagram. Again, we have law enforcement saying they cannot prove that Bryan Kohberger followed the victims on Instagram. They can't prove that he had any connections to the victims because he scrubbed his electronics. 3, we do know that Bryan Kohberger had an affinity for Ted Bundy and also Elliot Rogers. I do believe that this is true. He did study both of these men when he was attending college at DeSales. And we know that he watched from Dateline NBC that he watched Ted Bundy. We also saw the hoodie photo with our own eyes of him posing as Ted Bundy. So I do believe this is true. I do believe he had an affinity for Ted Bundy and Elliot Rodger. Let me know what you think. Number 4, Bryan Kohberger sat down and had a rest at the crime scene. There were buttocks marks in a chair. I don't know if he sat down and had a rest. To me, the timing doesn't seem like he would have sat down. More likely, he fell back into the chair, leaving the marks. Let me know what you think about this. Number 5, the 2 traffic stops were law enforcement trying to get images of scratch marks and bruising on his knuckles. Well, we now know that a WSU colleague talked to law enforcement and said that he did see a scratch mark and swelling on BK's hands, and BK told him he had been in a car accident. I also think it's hard to believe that these 2 traffic stops, minutes apart in Indiana, were just a coincidence. I think law enforcement, in my opinion, I do believe the FBI was behind the traffic stops. I do believe they did want to get images of his hands and face on camera while they were waiting for probable cause to get their arrest warrant. Let me know if you have a different take. Number 6, Bryan Kohberger's family suspected he might be guilty. We heard his sister said this, and we've also heard reports that Michael Kohberger did not purchase the ticket for that cross-country road trip that Jason Labar, Bryan Kohberger's Pennsylvania attorney, described as pre-planned. So we don't know the answer to this yet. We don't know if this was planned or not, but we do know that Bryan Kohberger was working as a teaching assistant and that his duties included grading papers. His duties included administering exams. So it's very hard to believe that his father didn't know anything when he was picking Bryan Kohberger up on the 13th, the day that final exams were supposed to be beginning. I don't know what he knew, but he had to know that something was wrong. It's also strange, in my opinion, that the Kohbergers allowed Bryan Kohberger to park his Hyundai Elantra inside the garage. If you haven't subscribed, please hit the subscribe button. It's free and it helps me out a lot. Give this a thumbs up and drop me a comment. Let me know what you think about all of this in the comment section below.
I got nightmares in my head, I fear that the thoughts build up until I can't hear, that my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear that the thoughts build up until I can't hear, that my mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I've been feeling weird, I can't seem to focus good enough. Nothing's really clear, sometimes it could be a little tough.